Hey guys, Chris from Adaptation here, and this is video number 2 in my error correction series. If you want to see the previous video in this series, I'm going to put a card up there and the link in the description below. In this video, I'm going to show you how to correct two types of errors that do not affect the trial balance. Errors of original entry and errors of transposition. Apart from that, just a couple of reminders. One, you can use the timestamps in the description to this video to jump around to different parts so that you don't necessarily have to watch the entire thing if you've watched a piece of it already or if you've come looking for something specific. Also, I would invite you to have a pen and a piece of paper or a notebook so you can take notes as you go along, jot down your questions, try the exercises, and of course, if you have any questions, put them in the comment section below. And one more thing, don't forget to visit the website, my website, where you can download a handout on errors and about 7 other topics, and you get free notes and questions and that kind of stuff. Okay guys, with that said, let's get into the work. Okay guys, so just a reminder, error correction, how we correct errors, we use the general journal. And yes, you may have T accounts to show. And in either of those cases, you are going to need to be proficient with your double entry rules. If you are a bit rusty with them, I strongly suggest you go back and take a look at the first video in this series as I give a bit of a crash course in double entry with the examples that I go through. If you think you're ready for these questions, then by all means, let's go to it. All right, so what you guys are going to notice on the top left-hand side of the screen, I have a table with double entry rules that I'm going to refer to throughout the video, just once again to kind of keep the crash course going. And on the right-hand side of the screen, I guess above my head, you guys are going to see some T accounts. Now, the T accounts are not necessary when you are doing questions because most times the questions just require you to do the journal entries. I like to show the T accounts because it helps students to see the quote-unquote working. It's like, for example, if you were in math class and your teacher was doing a bunch of additional working in his or her head, you might not be able to follow, but if he or she wrote it down, you could follow a bit more easily. That's why I have those things there. So when you are trying the questions that I give you to try, you can draw up T accounts, but try to work towards being able to do these questions, these error correction questions, without T accounts. In any case, do what feels right. And if you have any trouble, if you have any uncertainty, any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, let's take a look at this error, which is called an error of original entry. Now, this has to do with when you enter the wrong amount, right? So an error of original entry occurs when the wrong figure or dollar amount was used for double entry, right? To fix this error, the difference, and notice difference is in a bigger size than everything else, right? The difference between the correct and incorrect amounts is entered in both accounts. Okay, so let's take a look at the example and get some traction with this, right? So example 4a, where the amount entered was not enough. So another way to say this is where the amount was understated or undercast. Those of you who watch my bank reconciliation videos, and I might put a card up on the left-hand side and a link in the description below to that playlist, you would have heard me talk about overstated, understated, overcast, undercast. But let's get back to the question. So the payment of wages, 15,000 by check, was recorded in both accounts as 5,000. So, I mean, you guys can read this if you want, all right? But I'm just going to talk it through. So long story short, we were supposed to record 15,000, but we recorded 5. Now, let's see, the payment of wages. Wages is an expense, and when you pay an expense, you have to debit the expense account. All right, so in wages now, we're going to put 15,000, and it was by check. So check means bank was affected, right? Now, bank is an asset, and if we're paying money out of bank, that means bank is decreasing. So to record a decrease in an asset, you're going to have to credit the asset account, all right? So we put 15,000 there, and we put wages expense. Now that is what should have happened. Let's go back to the error and see what actually happened, right? But both, right, by check, but what was recorded as 5,000. So what happened? This was recorded as 5,000, as was this, 5,000. So what's going on here is that we have not put enough in the accounts. We have put too little. The amount put was undercast. So what we need to do is we need to put more. We need to increase the entries. So how do we do that? Well, in the wages account, the debit was not enough. So we need to debit more. And not just a random figure. Once again, as it said across there, the difference between the incorrect and the correct amount. So the correct amount was 15,000. Right? Let's go back across real quick so you can see it, right? The correct amount was 15,000 and the incorrect amount was 5,000. That's a difference of 10. So we need to put 10,000 more on the debit side, sorry, of the T account. All right, and we'll say bank because we also have to go in bank on the credit side, which in this case, as you can see, is undercast or understated, that particular entry. And we need to increase, right, that amount. I'll just copy it down, right? Right. So just to recap, we initially put 5,000 in each of these accounts. The debit and credit was correct. The accounts were correct. The amount was wrong. So what do we need to do? We need to fix it so that it says the correct amount. Was the amount we put in too high or too low? It was too low. It was undercast or understated. How do we fix that? We have to increase the amount put in on those sides. How do we do that? We put in more on the same sides. So in the wages account, the debit side was undercast by 10,000, so you put 10,000 more on that side. In bank, the credit side was undercast by 10,000, so you put 10,000 more on the credit side. Cool. Let's go back across to the general journal. All right. So we're going to see the debit to wages expense, right? A credit to bank, and we're going to see to correct an error of original entry. So once again, just a reminder, in case you didn't see the first video, when you are entering information in your general journal, the debit entry or entries go first. They go before the credit entry or entries. Also, the credit entry or entries is or are indented relative to the debit entry or entries. Right? So that's why you're seeing this big space here. Right? So that's why bank wasn't put directly under wages. It has to be indented. Okay, so that was example 1. Well, 4A, I guess you could say. Let's take a look at example 4B. Right, let's take a read. So this example is where the amount entered was too much, also known as an overcast or overstated amount. So the payment of rent, $2,500, was recorded in both accounts as $3,500. So we have too much in the account. So the debit and credit was correct in terms of where it was put, right? We debited the correct account, credited the correct account, but for the wrong amount. So these errors are for errors of the wrong amounts. Let's go across to the T accounts and take a look and see where these things actually went and how they looked. So we put rent as an expense, and when you're paying an expense, you have to debit it. You debit where the money is going. And the money came from bank. Once again, bank is an asset. If you're paying money out of bank, bank is decreasing. So we need to credit bank. And what did we pay? We paid rent expense. So this is what was actually entered. If we go back across to the information, we will see that the payment was supposed to be recorded as $2,500, but was recorded as $3,500 in both accounts. So that's too much. So we have too much on the debit side of rent. Let's go back across to rent. We have too much on the debit side of rent and too much on the credit side of bank. So both sides are overstated by 1,000, right? The correct amount was supposed to be $2,500. So to do that, we have to decrease each of these sides by 1,000. So in the case of the rent expense account, to decrease the debit side, you have to go and put an entry on the credit side. So we're going to go across here and we are going to put a credit entry for the amount by which the entry was overstated. The difference between the correct amount and the incorrect amount, which in this case is 1,000. So this 1,000 technically acts as a counterbalance or a decrease to this 3,500. So the net figure in that rent expense account will be 2,500. Right? The detail will say bank, because we have to go on the debit side of bank and put the same entry. Why? Because the credit entry in this bank account for the payment of rent was overstated. The credit entry was too high. How do we fix that? We have to go on the debit side and put the amount by which it was overstated so that it would kind of counterbalance or act as a decrease for the 3,500. And that will say rent expense. So let's go back across to the general journal. So once again, we put the debit entry first, debit to bank, because the credit side was overstated. And we're going to credit rent expense because the debit side was overstated. All right, and of course, don't forget to put your narration. Again, your narration doesn't have to be too long, but don't make it overly short either. All right, so I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes. When I say you all could pause, right? Let me scroll down. All right, so I'm going to give you all actually 4B and 4C this time. All right, so pause it, try it out, and then unpause. All right, so let's take a look at those questions. So question 4B, the purchase of new machinery valued at $50,000 by check was entered in both accounts as 40,000. Okay, so what did we buy? We bought machinery. That means machinery is increasing. Machinery is an asset. To record an increase in an asset, we have to debit. So we were supposed to go in the machinery account and debit. All right, now did we do that? We did, but did we use the correct amount? Actually, no, it says that we used 40,000 instead of 50,000. So let's go in the machinery account, and we're going to put 40,000 there, right? And we paid by check, so it says bank. Now, back across to the double entry rules. Now, bank is an asset, and if you pay money out of bank, right, that means your asset is decreasing. And to record a decrease in your asset, you have to credit the asset account. So if we go across to the T account for bank, on the credit side, we'll put the 40,000 and we put machinery because we bought machinery. That's where the money went. Now, once again, these amounts are incorrect. They are understated. Let's go back to the information. All right. So it says that the purchase of machinery valued at 50 was entered as 40. So the amounts are understated. By how much? The difference, which is $10,000. So let's go back to the T accounts. So if this is if it's supposed to be 50 and it's currently at 40, we need to put 10,000 more on the same side. Putting 10,000 more on the same side will increase the total on that side. So together, it will count as 50,000. By the same token, what we're going to do, we're going to put 10,000 on the credit side here because the credit side was 10,000 short. All right, now let's go back across to the general journal. So we are debiting machinery, you can put machinery at cost if you want, for 10,000. And we are crediting bank for 10,000. And this is to correct an error of original entry. Nice. Okay, let's take a look at the second second question you guys had to do. So the payment of electricity expense 1,200 by check was entered in both accounts as 1,600. Ooh, so that's too much. That's an overstatement. So if you think back to the example, we have to kind of go on the opposite side. But let's take a look and see what happened in the transaction. So let's go across to the T accounts. So we paid electricity. Now when you pay money to something, you debit that something, right? So 1,600 was how much was actually put. And we said bank. Bank is what we pay with a check. In the bank account, bank is an asset. If you're making a payment, your asset of bank will decrease. To record a decrease in an asset, you have to credit the asset account. So 1,600 was the amount that was used to pay electricity expense, right? But it was supposed to be 1,200. So therefore, each of these sides is too high by 400. How do we decrease each side? Well, let's take it one at a time. To decrease the debit side, we have to go on the credit side. So we're going to put 400 because it was 1,200 was supposed to be the correct amount. We put 16, which is 400, too high. So we go on the opposite side and put a 400 there, and that's going to counterbalance it. So the net effect here would be a 1,200 on the debit side. Similarly, in bank, we're going to go on the credit side, sorry, the debit side, put 400 and put electricity expense, right? So what this debit entry does is it kind of counterbalances and reduces that credit entry. So the net effect here will be a credit entry of 1,200. Okay, so if we go back to the general journal, we're going to put that, right? So don't forget debit entries first. What did we debit? We debited bank. I don't know. We debited bank for 400, and we credited electricity. Take your time. All right, for 400 as well. And this is also to correct an error of original entry. Right, so when figures are understated, you just repeat the exact same debit and credit with the difference, the amount by which it was too small. When it's overstated, you have to reverse the double entry to decrease the initial items. Okay guys, so let's take a pause, rearrange some stuff, and we're going to come back with the second type of error today. Okay guys, so this type of error is called an error of transposition. Now, if you take a read of the explanation across here, it says an error of transposition occurs where the digits for the figure used for double entry were mixed up. Now, the thing is, and like I said, you can take a pause and read my notes, but more or less, it means that the wrong figure was used for double entry. I honestly don't know why they count this as a separate type of error. I've seen it in textbooks as a separate type of error. I've seen it in one other textbook as a special type of error of original entry, which it should be. I don't think it should have its own category, but that's just my opinion. Now, something very interesting about an error of transposition is that the difference is always divisible by 9. So we're not going to go into all the mathematics and arithmetic behind that particular thing, but if you ever were curious to know what type of error it was, to distinguish it from an error of original entry, to be very, very specific, the difference is divisible by 9. Let's take a look, right? So in example 5 here, it says the purchase of $350 worth of stock on credit from Mike Rackers was entered as $530. So $350 worth of stock was purchased, but it was entered as $530. So the amount entered was too much. It was overstated. Now let's go across to the T accounts. So remember, when you make a credit purchase, you have to debit purchases. So you would have put in $530 because that was the figure, right? Credit to I can't fit. Right, so let's put Rackers, right? M Rackers. And in Mike's account now, we're going to put $530 as well. We're going to put purchases, right? Now we credit in Mike's account because remember, if we're buying on credit, it means we didn't pay for it yet. Therefore, we owe money for it. Anything for which we owe money is a liability. And if it's increasing, you credit your liability. Okay, now what do we do to fix this? So because it's too high, right, we have to reduce it. Now by how much? Let's go back across to the information. So it says it was $350 and $530. The difference there is $180. And if you check, 180 is exactly divisible by 9, which will give us 20. Right? I mean, I like maths a lot, but I mean, I don't see why this needs to be a separate thing, but I'm doing it just in case they're going to nitpick, right? So in the purchases account, the debit side is too high. What did we learn just now? If it's too high, we have to go on the opposite side and put the balancing figure, right? And let's just copy and paste that, right? And then in Mike's account now, we're going to copy and paste purchases. So the credit side was too high, which means we have to debit the account in order to bring it down. Right now, that's what it looks like. T account. Let's take a look and see what it looks like in the journal. So it's debit to Mike and a credit to purchases. So if we go across here, all right, we're going to see a debit to Mike Rackers and then a credit to the purchases account. Right, and to correct an error, sorry, it should say an error of transposition. Okay, so guess what? It's time for you guys to take a little try at this. As you can see, it's more or less the same thing as what we did in the previous set of errors. So let's take a little scroll down. I'm going to just give you guys 2 quick ones to do. All right. Okay, so take a pause and try them. Okay, how did they go? Okay, so in the first case, the receipt of $3,500 in cash from a debtor was recorded in both accounts as $5,300. So if we receive cash, let's go up here, right? Cash is an asset. If we receive cash, cash is increasing. To record an increase in an asset, you're going to debit. Right, so if you go across to the cash account, we're going to debit there. So we put $5,300 and it came from debtor. Now the debtor, if you go back across to the rules, a debtor is an asset. And if a debtor pays you back, he or she now owes you less money, which means your debt has decreased. And to record a decrease in an asset, you have to credit the asset account. So we're going to go across to the debtor's account. We're going to put $5,300 on cash. Now once again, the correct amount that should have gone here and here was $3,500. So that means the difference is $1,800, which is divisible by 9, 200, right? So we're going to need to put $1,800 on the opposite side of those incorrect entries. So the debit side was overstated. To counterbalance it, we go on the credit side, $1,800, and we're going to put debtor. Sorry, I keep spelling that wrong. Here now, we're going to put on the debit side, cash, right? $1,800 again. Because in the debtor's account, the credit entry is overstated, which means it's too high. So to reduce it or counterbalance it, you have to go on the opposite side and put an entry there. So the net effect will be a single credit of $3,500. So let's go. So we have a debit to debtor and a credit to cash. Let's take a look in the T account, the journal, sorry. So a debit was to the debtor, right, for $1,800. Sorry, I forgot to put my comma. And the credit was to cash. $1,800, right? So to correct an error of transposition. Okay, and in the second error, now let's take a read of that and see what it says. So it says the purchase of new machinery valued at 54,000 was entered in both accounts as 45,000. So what do we buy? Machinery. So let's go up to the rules. So machinery is an asset. If you're buying an asset, it's increasing, which will require a debit to the machinery account. Let's go to the machinery account. So we're going to put in machinery 45,000 and we paid by check, so that means bank. Now bank is also an asset. Let's go back across to the rules. So bank is an asset, and if we're paying money to buy something and we're paying money out of bank, the asset of bank is decreasing. To record a decrease in an asset, you have to credit the asset account. So let's go to the bank account across there now. So we're going to go on the credit side. We're going to put 45,000 and we're going to put machinery at cost, or you can just put machinery. So we have a corresponding debit and credit of equal value. But let's go back to the question, right? It says the purchase of new machinery valued at 54 was entered as 45. So the double entry, the debit and the credit, were both understated by, how much is that? $9,000. So how do we fix understatements? We have to increase both of those entries, both the debit and the credit. How do we increase them? By debiting again and crediting again in the accounts that were debited and credited respectively. Let's go to the T account. So what I'm saying is that we need 9,000 more on this side, right? Oops, sorry. In order to get it to be equal to 54, right? 45 and 9 is 54. And similarly, we need 9,000 more on this side in order to get that to be 54. So the debit and credit were just repeated, but with the shortfall, the amount of the difference between the correct figure and the incorrect figure. So if we go to the journal now, right, so we have to debit machinery at cost. I guess you could put at cost, right, that's fine. And it was 9,000. And of course, 9,000 is divisible by 9, all right? And then we're going to credit bank, of course, 9,000. And to correct an error of Philip, do that. Right. Okay, cool. Okay guys, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you want to see more videos, I'm going to put a couple of videos on that side. You can click either of those boxes. Don't forget to subscribe. And again, it's over my face. And also, don't forget to go to my website. I'm going to put a button across there. Click on that button. Go and get your handouts. Anyway guys, I'll see you next time. Bye.